Well, then we'll get rolling. Thank you all for joining today. My name is Ryan Barr. We're going to talk about elevating confidence in the justice journey today. So excited to be here in lovely Atlantic City and at the NACA midyear. So it's going to be a good session. Looks like we've got a blend of different folks in the room. So I'll jump through a couple of different topics as we go through the session today and try to make sure that that it's kind of connecting and resonating. And if something doesn't make sense as I'm saying it, please, we've got a small enough group, interrupt me, kind of raise your hand. I'd love to, have a little bit of a dialogue as we go through this and make sure that things are connecting and that it's making sense. Once again, like I said, my name is Ryan Barr. I have the pleasure of serving as the Senior Vice President of Product Development and Strategy for Tyler Technologies, specifically over our Courts and Justice Division. So I spend my time working with court leaders on the business of the court side as well as the technology side, kind of steering the solutions that Tyler's bringing and kind of helping you meet the needs of your court and ensuring that we're helping you to meet the needs of your constituency. So today we're going to talk about elevating and restoring and elevating confidence in the justice system. And I'm gonna talk about new technologies that play into that, and we're going to start with a little bit of a history lesson, because sometimes technology can be interesting, it can be scary, and it can introduce a lot of change. So we're gonna go way back in time. We're gonna go back to the year 1860. And so the United States was a nation that was stretching from coast to coast, right? And in the year 1860, we didn't have cars. We didn't have airplanes, right? We didn't have a lot of things. And so communication and getting information, across the coast was very challenging. West of the Mississippi, right, it was the Wild West, and you had about 2,000 miles of sort of this area that we were just starting to explore and sending people over into. And so you enter the Pony Express, this new kind of group of young riders on horseback who would work to take mail, right, 2,000 miles from Missouri to California to make sure that people could communicate, to make sure that you had accurate, timely information, right? This is a really, really important thing to make sure that you can do commerce, you can, keep up on what's happening with folks that have gone from one side of the country to the other. And these folks were in super, super high demand, right? Really transforming communication. In 10 days or less, you can get stuff from Missouri into California. And that was sort of this marvel of logistics and of human endurance, right? I mean, how many of you have watched a movie or read a book where they talk about the Pony Express and right? You know who these people are, right? This is this amazing thing in American history. How many of you knew that they were only in existence for 18 months? Kind of shocking. You hear about them and there's movies and all this stuff, and you would have expected that this was this long endeavor. Well, they were basically put out of business overnight. About 18 months after the Pony Express came into existence, the completion of the transcontinental telegraph occurred. And once the transcontinental telegraph was there, I can send information instantly from one place to another. And you might think also, wow, okay, there's this group of writers who have been providing this amazing service to the country, and now they're obsolete. Well, that's not true either. This technology might have changed the role that they had and the work that they did, but it certainly didn't leave them jobless. A lot of those writers, they became telegraph operators. They knew the connections in the various cities. They knew how to route things effectively and efficiently, and so they jumped in to be telegraph operators. Or they participated in different roles, taking their skills and sort of their endurance and that pioneering spirit and taking that to help expand the Transcontinental Railway. And so these folks, they were freed from the peril of the trail, and they were allowed to take their skills and their capabilities and their talents and do impactful, long-lasting other endeavors that really changed kind of the way that we communicated and the way that we could share information and transport goods. And it really allowed them to go toward more advanced, impactful work, right? So this technology change, it didn't really replace them, right? It elevated them. And we're going to be talking about that a lot. If we move forward a little bit in time, anybody remember these? Stacks of files, right? So, we probably still have some of these in some of our offices. But if you think 20, 30, 40 years ago, well, this is the only way that we operated. I mean, if you were in a bookkeeping or an accounting profession, you had an account. You had debits and credits on paper, and you would subtotal by hand, maybe, right? Double checking your math. Remember, everybody have a checkbook at some point where you did your little reconciliation in your checkbook by hand, right? We had piles of binders, right? Everywhere. I mean, everywhere. File cabinets dominated how we worked. And then comes this thing, right? And oh my goodness, what are we gonna do now? Anybody remember Lotus 1-2-3? WordPerfect, right? These sort of applications started to come out, and they created maybe some concern, right? I mean, if you're sitting at your desk and now there's this weird device, what am I gonna do with this thing? I'm used to these piles of paper and processing my chart of accounts and working through things. I'm used to being on a typewriter or writing by hand, right? Remember whiteout? Who's used whiteout recently? Still a little bit, but I used to have, lots and lots of that. You had, all these things that you used on an ongoing basis. And as the computer came around, I mean, there were tons of fears that it was going to replace us. In fact, later in the presentation, I'll pull up an article where literally in the early 80s, jobs are gone. Like, that's it. The computer is going to replace all of us, right? The fear mongering and the concern was enormous. But here we are. It's 2025. How many of you, I don't know, have a boatload of technology in your pocket, right? Like a ton of it. This phone does way more than that computer could ever do. And so technology didn't replace us. Technology transformed us. It transformed the way that we work. It transformed how we operate, right? We went from sort of folder shuffling to data entry and data management, right? And we're changing the way that we interact. And so here we are today, fast forwarding even more years, and technology has gotten crazy. I held up my phone a minute ago, but the internet and the rise of connected systems and the computing power that's available to us has completely reframed and reshaped how we do what we do, right? It has completely opened up new opportunities and new ways of thinking and working. And we need to be aware of what those opportunities are and how those opportunities might influence how we operate our courts and what we can do to enhance confidence in the justice system and leverage these technologies. I've got a young son. Well, he's not young. He's 16 now. He drives. I got a text from my wife this morning that the vehicle that my son drives, that they were in it last night, and it was rattling. Apparently, his license plate is loose on the back of his car. And so my wife sent me a text, which is powered by the internet. That showed up on my cell phone, which is powered by the internet. And she said, "Hey, the license plate is rattling, and can you get that stuff that fixes it?" So this would be insulation material that's got an adhesive on it, right? You can buy it at Home Depot or whatever. So I opened up my Amazon app and pressed a button, and there will be stuff at my house tonight. Like, that's crazy, right? And that's enabled by this modern technology. It has changed the types of jobs that we have. It has changed all of the things that we do. Traffic signals, shipping lanes, right? Court systems. All of these things are completely and totally revolutionized by this change in technology. And the amount of information that we're preparing, the way that we look at data, the way that we interact has completely and totally changed. Now, again, technology isn't replacing us. Technology is empowering us. 4 or 5 years ago, well, I don't know, Amazon's been in my life pretty heavily for at least 4 or 5 years. Maybe 10 years ago, when you only bought a book on Amazon, I would have had to drive to Home Depot or somewhere else to go get that. And now when I get home, that'll be available at my front door, and I can take care of that immediately, right? Increasing access to those basic services. So the tools that are available today really allow us to make decisions faster. They allow us to recognize value faster. All of that information is really empowering us to activate and think in a different way. And so we're going to talk today about technology that can enhance the justice journey. And I'm going to focus on three things. Those three things are SaaS, why SaaS matters, what SaaS is. I'll talk a little bit in technical terms, but I'll talk probably more in business terms and what SaaS enables for you and your court. We'll talk about analytics and data and insight and why that matters. And then we'll talk about AI and what AI is practically today, maybe dispel a little bit of the fear-mongering about some of the things that AI might do and how it, kind of be a little more practical in how to use it. And then we'll talk a little bit about a paper that Casca put out, really in focusing on bringing value to the courts with things like AI and maybe not being at the front of the spear, right? Maybe this isn't the right place to always be at the tip of the spear. And so let's talk about how we can actually bring AI in a way that makes a lot of sense. So the reason that we're going to talk about these three things together is because they actually work together very well. They're very synergistic in the way that they operate. And we'll talk about why those three pieces sit so well together and how kind of as technology has changed, we're able to do things that even 5, 6, 7 years ago were not really possible, and certainly 30 years ago, not possible. And then reframing maybe how we think about how we can elevate confidence in the justice system, how we can elevate the services that we're bringing to our constituents, and how we can make sure that we're really leveraging these capabilities in a way that is being really good stewards of the trust that the public has put into each and all of us. So SaaS, at a very high level, just to kind of an introduction of terms, everybody know what SaaS is? Hands, yes? No hands, a little bit? Okay. So SaaS really, this is systems that are really available at any time, anywhere. We'll go into a little more depth here in a minute, but you can think of it as that way. It's a system that you don't need to worry about, broadly speaking, whether that system is functioning, whether it's on, whether it's being appropriately managed and maintained. That is your service provider's responsibility, right? It's not your responsibility as the court administrator. Analytics and AI, or analytics, when you think about a SaaS system, SaaS is often synonymous with cloud computing. When you think about cloud computing, one of the unique things about cloud computing is that it allows you to scale without having to purchase new hardware. So if y'all have been in this industry for a while, you probably have gone through capital procurement cycles, right? Where I've got to go buy a bunch of stuff. You don't need to do that in a cloud environment, and it allows you to do some really interesting things with analytics, where you can do large processing that might not be financially viable if you had to go procure all of that equipment on an ongoing basis. And then we'll talk about AI and how that comes together to really enhance that and drive greater effectiveness and greater efficiency in all that we do. Okay. Does that sound good? All right, cool. It's early. We're in Atlantic City. Super Bowl yesterday. We got an Eagles fan in the room. Any other Eagles fans in the room? A little bit? Okay. People don't care. All right. I get it. Okay. So SaaS, software as a service, at a very, very high level, I'm going to oversimplify this a little bit, uses the internet to securely deliver software solutions. I mentioned earlier Amazon. Amazon's a SaaS service that I take advantage of. They also happen to be an e-commerce company, right? But their whole solution is a SaaS system that lives up in the cloud. I jump into it as a consumer of that system. I make a purchase, and boom, I go and I get my stuff. Anybody use Microsoft Office? Probably all of you, right? Most of you probably have an Office 365 account, right? Office 365 is a SaaS solution. You may not recognize that out of the gate because, I don't know, I have all the Office apps installed on my computer. But Office 365 at its core is a subscription. You're paying for a software as a service. If you use OneDrive, everybody use OneDrive, right? OneDrive's a SaaS solution. And so those files are securely stored in the cloud. Microsoft is providing all of those services to you, and you really don't have to worry about it. You can pull it up on your iPhone. You can pull it up on your Android. If your IT department has provisioned you accordingly, you can get it on your secure computer, and you can go access those on the cloud, and you can look at those all the time, right? So SaaS is really at its core. It's software as a service using the internet to securely deliver these solutions. You hear it oftentimes just called cloud computing. I'm an iPhone guy, an Apple guy. I held up my phone earlier. And so, if you're a Apple consumer, this might be your iCloud account, right? Like that's also a SaaS product that's available to you. And so you think about these sort of things. Sometimes people, candidly, oftentimes incorrectly, refer to SaaS as infrastructure or hosting or other things, right? There are more precise terms to talk about, like infrastructure as a service or platform as a service, which are different. SaaS is really the solution that you're getting access to, right? Not that they're just providing you hardware for your software to run on. You're actually you're getting the actual software in its totality and all of its services, all of its capabilities as what you're licensing from your partner. So the fundamental question is, right, like, is SaaS right for the future of government agencies? Should we be interested in this? Do I want to just subscribe to software? Do I lose control? Is that scary? Is that risky? Right? There's a lot of things that you have to kind of unpack under this to know if SaaS makes sense for you, for your agency, for your constituents, and does it help to boost the public trust in a way that is appropriate with our role in what we do. So I would argue that the answer is actually yes. SaaS is ideal as it boosts efficiency, enhances security, while enabling the adoption of new technologies at a faster rate. And we'll talk about some of the pieces of why that is. And there's a reason that I opened with some of these stories, right, of the Pony Express and the PC and other things, right? These were terrifying events in that time, right? I mean, imagine if you were a farmer and all of a sudden industrial farming comes around. Like, oh my gosh, this is a frightening thing. Like my entire livelihood is at risk. But that's not what ends up happening, right? So we can oftentimes sort of get stuck in the thinking pattern that we have at the time and not recognize the components of a technological change that might be beneficial to us and what those might mean to those that we serve, and also making sure that we understand the risks and that we can appropriately mitigate them. So let's start with a why, right? So why might SaaS be a good solution for government solutions? We'll start with protecting data. SaaS solutions inherently, if they're done properly and you have a good vendor partner, they offer redundancy, scalability, and security out of the box. How many of you think it's important for your data to be protected? Good. I'm glad that everyone agrees. That's a core trust that we have, right? Think about the world we live in today and how much of what we do is completely driven by data, right? You go back 50 years and we're talking about those big rolls of paper. Well, that data is just in a file box. How many of you have all that data in a file box still? I mean, I have paper copies of a lot of stuff, but I use the word copy on purpose because the primary versions of those documents, most of the time, are digital, right? How many of you are willing to leave those on a single device and not have backups of that device? Well, I did that a while ago. That's why I brought this hard drive with me, little name and shame of myself. About 10-ish years ago, I didn't want to have all my data on the cloud, right? Like, that's weird. Why do I want to give all my stuff to other people? I don't trust them. They're not very trustworthy. Yeah, okay. Like, I've had an iPhone for a long time, but I'm not going to trust, at that time it was Steve Jobs. I'm not going to trust Steve Jobs with all of my data. You're crazy. So I had this lovely Western Digital hard drive. It still functions, by the way. But about 10-ish years ago, this was my primary backup. I didn't have a second backup of anything. And all of a sudden, it stopped working. Whoops. I didn't have another copy of the stuff that was on this. All of a sudden, on my Mac, I couldn't mount this drive. For the tech folks in the room, I tried to use, disk repair on my Mac, and okay, that didn't work. I dropped down into the terminal and started, trying to mount it, trying to, FSIC the drive and do all these things on the drive and do all these components to fix it, and I couldn't fix it. I knew there was data on this drive that I needed at some point in my life, but I couldn't fix it. So I unplugged it, stored it safely, and lo and behold, shortly before this conference, I had a need for some of what I knew was on this drive. And so I spent the better part of 3 weeks fighting with this stupid hard drive to get the information off of it. I was successful. It cost me a decent amount of money and a tremendous amount of time to get the information off of this drive. Once I was able to recover the busted up file system, it took inordinate amounts of time to go find the files that I needed because, well, the file system was busted and things weren't organized in the filing cabinets that I had put them in, right? And now they were just sort of thrown all over the place as though a tornado had gone through my hard drive. And that happens all the time. Maybe not necessarily a hard drive, but for the technologists in the room, or for those of you that partner with technologists in the room, your technologists deal with tornadoes all the time, right? They're spending inordinate amount of time fighting to save data, protect data, upgrade systems, fight off security threats, right? All of these sorts of things that broadly come out of the box from a SaaS provider. Today, my data doesn't live on this drive anymore. This has been securely wiped. Anybody could take it, whatever, doesn't matter to me. My data is in the cloud. My data is securely stored with a SaaS provider because they've demonstrated and proven that they are trustworthy and that they are managing that information in a secure fashion. If you're partnering with a good provider, those cloud service providers, they're investing billions with a B in security. And they've hired thousands of experts to protect against growing threats that are occurring on a day-to-day basis. How many of you have heard about a government agency being breached in some way, shape, or form? In fact, there's a session happening right now talking about a breach that occurred, right? A terrible situation. This does not guarantee that you won't be under attack or that you are perfectly secure, right? There is still an obligation for your partner and for your agency to be aware of and ahead of threats. But partnering with agencies like this, with the resources that they have, you're going to be in a much better position than you would be without a partner, a SaaS partner who's got a good cloud service partner behind them. At Tyler, we do a lot of work with Amazon Web Services, and I can tell you that in my role, I observe agencies being attacked constantly. And we partner with our partners to fend off those attacks constantly. And I would just ask you to think about the world that we are living in today and how it is an ever-growing, more hostile place in the digital space. And do you have the resources to fight that off well? And if you don't have the resources to fight that off well, there's a reason most of your stuff is probably with Office 365 in the cloud. Before I came to Tyler, I was in the private sector, and I'll tell you what, we took every one of our systems up into SaaS. One of the reasons we did it is simply surface area differentiation. If you hit me here, you didn't hit me there, and there, right? If something got breached, not all of it got breached, right? And those are the sorts of things that are important when you think about resiliency. We've got to be prepared, right? My hard drive, lovely as it is, thankfully, it didn't go through a natural disaster. But y'all, we are living in a time where natural disasters are happening like crazy. Just recently, we had tragic fires on the West Coast. I lived in California for most of my life. I've got friends who were impacted by these fires. This is terrible. I lived in, through wildfire after wildfire, and this is an ongoing and ever-growing threat. And if you have a physical location in an area that is at risk of being impacted by a natural disaster, that's a real threat that you need to think about. We've got hurricanes and earthquakes and things that are happening in places we didn't expect them to happen. I can tell you, I was speaking with a court administrator who is one of our SaaS customers, and they went through a terrible situation like this, and they were able to open their doors the day after the natural disaster. Now, their facilities were destroyed, but they were able to open their doors, and they were able to provide access to justice immediately, which is super critical. And if you want to talk about increasing and elevating confidence in the system is available even in the face of tragedy when the system needs to be available, right? That's a critical piece. So cyber resiliency This is really, really essential for maintaining consistent outcomes despite ongoing cyber attacks and all the things that are happening. SaaS can really give you an opportunity to sort of have blue skies ahead and be able to think about justice and think about providing access to justice in a very different way. It provides that robust framework that protects the court and the people that the court serves on an ongoing basis. This is not something that typically happens overnight, right? If you're an on-premise installation, or if you're moving from legacy systems, right? Maybe you have a mainframe that you're operating and you're doing a change, right? So you need a strong partner that'll help you in this. Obviously Tyler is interested in having a conversation with you about that, but there are lots of great partners out there. This is something that, as you think about your court and what you're doing, understanding the differences in the world that we live in and how technology has changed is really, really critical for you to reconsider how you might want to go about protecting your court and providing those services to your constituents. SaaS, coupled with the next piece that we'll talk about, which is data and analytics, is additionally powerful, and something that I hope this resonates and why this resonates. So we think about the paper ledgers that we all ran years ago, and you might still run today. If I asked you to go grab a piece of insight from those paper ledgers, it might be hard. Hey, can you tell me about this transaction, or how many transactions we've done with this particular thing, or what's the average of this, or what, like that's a very difficult and arduous task. Even in some computer systems, that's a difficult and arduous task, because you got to pull report after report after report and put these things together. And so there's an opportunity when you move into a modern cloud infrastructure with good data and analytic tools surrounding it to completely reframe and reshape what that feels like. And so we're going to talk a little bit about connecting justice communities with data. One of the challenges of data right now is that data transformation can take a long time. How many of you work with multiple agencies? Probably everyone, right? How many of your agencies call everything exactly the same thing? If any of you raises your hand, I would like to know where you are, and I'd like to understand how you accomplish that, because I've never seen it. Right? One agency might call brown eyes in their system the code BRN. One might call it brown. One might call it ABC123XYZ. Well, none of those match. And so one of the challenges as you think about turning data into something actionable is you have to transform all that raw data into something usable and understandable that can provide value to your agency. And the sort of legacy pattern of this is that you do code mapping. And somebody sits around and they spend all their time mapping codes, right? Like, anybody ever done that before? It's terrible. And it's brittle, right? It's a difficult way to manage things on an ongoing basis over a long term, right? There are lots of tools that are available to us with the computing power we have today that can do this in a completely different way. Most of those are available from a good cloud partner, a SaaS provider who can provide an analytics solution. Once you put those pieces together, those analytics can analyze that data, and it can find meaningful patterns and can help you answer questions that extract actionable insights and help you make better decisions. So what does this look like? I'm gonna kind of walk through a bit of a visual walk on this and use a story from my past. So I started my career too long ago as a computer engineer. I started writing code, did that for a while, and realized that I was really interested in kind of the broader parts of the world, understanding marketing and business and finance, and spent my time in the private sector as I got started. And one of the roles that I had an opportunity to step into, immediately coming from a heavy, deep engineering role, I actually started doing government systems. I started building things for courts, go figure, DMVs. This was back in the late 90s and early 2000s. We had an agency in our area called WorkNet, which was kind of helping to connect folks with jobs and related things, and I was a DBA for them. And so kind of in this space, and I leveraged those skills for a bit and got into this role in the private sector where I was really trying to help shape long-term decision-making. We had a lot of data. It kind of looked like this. You can't do much with that. It's just a bunch of noise. right? Like, what does that mean? Are there patterns in it? Is there anything that I can do with it? And I was fortunate that I had kind of robust data analytics skills, whereas I stepped into this role, I could partner with, my boss and my peers in our function, where I could understand what they were looking for, but I could actually deal with the data, right? And so I would jump into the various databases and I would do all the stuff, and I kind of put the data together so that it started to kind of look like this. And like, okay, we're getting some pieces of data together that are maybe pattern matching, and we're able to answer some questions. And then take that data and turn it into something that, I don't know, you can actually use, right? Like, hey, here's a chart of this information, or here's how much we have available of this particular thing. At that time in my life, I was in the agricultural space, and we were making harvesting decisions on when we were going to pick things. Grapes is what we were picking, and it's a very perishable product. You want to pick it at the right time. We made wine out of those grapes. And so you got to pick the right stuff, otherwise the end product is pretty terrible. Like the wine doesn't get any better than when you pick it. You can only do bad things from it at that point, right? But the best it's ever going to be is when you pick that grape, if you pick the grape at the right time. And so we had to make a lot of decisions on when do we pick the grape. Well, prior to coming into that job, we didn't have the insight on some of the things that we needed to know, and so we guessed. And we knew about 30 days later if we had done the right thing. And the reason we had to guess is because we couldn't get the data together because it was really, really hard. Well, I was fortunate that I had a unique set of skills, and so I was able to kind of stitch those things together, and we were able to make real-time decisions. That was awesome. But you can't rely on having somebody who has those super unique set of skills to do that all the time. And in today's world, right, this was, 18 years ago. In today's world, you don't have to do that, right? If you've got a good partner who brings an analytic solution to you, you don't have to rely on a unique set of skills. These things can be done all the time for you. They can be done in near real time for you, where you can get these insights, bring this information, pull it together into a dashboard, pull it together into something that's actionable, and actually change how you do business on an ongoing basis. That's all theoretical, well and good, but let's talk about what that means in the real world. I'm going to use some examples as we talk about data and as we talk about AI that relate specifically to e-filing. Everybody know what e-filing is? I imagine, yes? Perfect, good. Most people are doing e-filing, and it's the entry level or the entry point for a whole lot of things into your court, right? So let's talk about what that might look like and how analytics solutions might help you with e-filing. So we're going to talk about three counties in Texas. We'll start with Parker County. Parker County participated in a statewide implementation of e-filing analytics in the state of Texas in 2022. So we're talking 2-3 years ago. And those analytics, they're comparative statewide analytics across all the different counties, available to all the courts, and they also have hyperlocal analytics. So you can start to say, hey, what's happening in my county versus what's happening in surrounding counties. You can kind of understand what's happening across the board. You can look at, all the various metrics, but you can get hyperlocal all the way down into individual employee components. And so Parker had this interesting problem where when you looked at the high-level numbers, it looked like all their employees were roughly performing the same. But there was a particular employee who she was just expressing that, man, she felt like her workload was just crazy. I'm just doing everything that I can, and I feel like I'm working way harder than other folks in the office. And the clerk is like, well, that's weird. When I look at the aggregate level data, it looks like y'all are doing the same thing. Well, data and insights can maybe help you answer that question in a more robust way. And so the clerk was able to look at these hyperlocal metrics and start to understand that her peer was processing the same number of cases. Whether intentionally or not, her peer was only processing very simple filings. She was processing all types of filings, including very complicated filings that took a significant amount of time to process and work through the system. And so while on the surface, they're both doing the same amount of work, it's clear that something's going on that we need to deal with. And I've got a tremendous employee who's super frustrated, and we don't want to lose good employees. And another employee who maybe we can work on balancing that workload. And so the clerk was able to balance that workload, change the way that their staff was activating because they had these insights that candidly, if you had to go look through all of those filing reports, I mean, what would that have taken you? Like 6 months, right? To do that by hand? You would have never been able to find that information. And that's available at the press of a button with a robust analytics solution. Furthermore, how many of you like frustrating the bar? Right? Not good, right? None of us want to do that, right? How many, we don't want to have self-represented litigants make filings that get rejected. It wastes your time, it wastes everyone's time, right? It's a terrible thing. So the clerk was also able to start to look at rejection patterns. Well, why are things being rejected when they come in? Do we need to change training? Do we need to train our staff to understand things differently? Do we need to do education with the bar? Do we need to change the way that our SRLs are getting information? Do we need to provide them better guidance? What do we need to do to be able to have the court work more efficiently? And the clerk was able to do that very, very successfully in Parker using the analytic solutions that were out there. Also, in Texas, the commissioner's court sets the budget, right? But every department comes in and makes requests for those budget requests. And obviously, if you're going to potentially increase taxes or potentially move dollars around into different areas because of the load that the things that you're doing, you want to make sure that you can justify those requests and those changes to the budget with actionable information, right? You don't just walk in and go, hey, can I get more money? Right? Like that's not the answer to do that. But if you don't have good data, that's almost what you end up doing. Right? Like I can ask for more employees because XYZ, but once the second or third follow-on question gets asked, it starts to get really hollow if you don't have good, real data and information underneath that. And so the clerk here was able to really put together a framework where all of the departments that they oversaw were able to come in with robust information below them, right? Why? Walk me through it. Are we driving employee efficiency? Yes. Okay. Our case volumes are coming in. Okay. What types of cases? Okay. Even if we continue on our patterns of driving employee efficiency, are we going to be able to meet this load? No, we're not. What's our statutory requirement? It's this. Now I can tell a story that when I go into the commissioners and I say, hey, we need more employees. And here's why. I can answer question after question after question, and I can justify that. And the clerk was able to successfully illustrate the need for additional staff based upon the increase in filing volume. And not just at the surface level, right? Being able to look at those hyperlocal data and understand what that means, which is critical, right? That matters in the world that we're in. If you're going to increase confidence and you're going to increase, the capacity and the capability of your team, being able to do this is really, really important. Got two more examples from different clerks, and we're going to really talk about people on these examples. This is Clint Ludwig from Tarrant County, the clerk's chief deputy, and we'll talk about Tarrant a little more. Tarrant has a really unique system where they've got a lot of automation, but they also have people looking at different queues. But because of that, because those queues can move significantly in volume on a day-to-day basis, you don't just want to assign someone to stare at a queue all day long if there's nothing happening in the queue. And some days there may be a lot of other types of filings. Mary Louise is the clerk out in Tarrant, and they've done some really interesting things where during COVID, they launched an online marriage licensing portal. Well, they got slammed with information, right? And slammed with requests. And these sort of tools allow Clint and the team to manage the staff and move them around because they can see what's happening on an ongoing basis and say, hey, we've got a bunch of excessive work over here. This is really low. Let's move this over here. Let's make sure that we can provide public service and make sure that we're doing that in a way that makes a lot of sense. The same thing in Tarrant County. David Trantham actually uses this to look at what the staff members are doing, help to drive their training, understand what they're capable of, be able to use these metrics again to understand how do we advance our people, how do we invest in our people, how do we have our people doing the things that are the best for them to do and provide the best amount of service to the customers and the constituents that we serve on an ongoing basis. And we talked about earlier how today's technology is a little bit different. Right? With the internet is powering and connecting everything. All of these systems are out there. Jobs are changing. There is a huge amount of data being prepared and created on an ongoing basis. And all of that data is flowing through countless devices around the world. Court data and the justice system is no exception to that, right? Electronic filing, those records are all digitized, right? It's not necessarily a piece of paper coming over the desk anymore. And if you do still take paper over the desk, which most jurisdictions do, what do you do with it? You digitize it, right? You turn it into data immediately, right? Whether that's through bulk scanning or whether that's through individual scanning or whatever your individual processes are, all of that data is being digitized. We've got, legislative requirements to have information available to the public near instantaneously, right? When you think about your public access portals and all of those components, all of that information is out there and available, and you need to have good stewardship over it, right? Court data is inherently sensitive. It's inherently, it's important data, right? Bad actors and entities are looking at that data. They're trying to scrape that information. They're trying to take that information on an ongoing basis. If you host your own public access portal, I suspect you probably spend a lot of time fighting off people taking all of your information because they're out there. They're doing that on an ongoing basis. Folks are harvesting information that y'all are the custodian of, that you all have an obligation and a responsibility to protect. And there are a lot of ways that you can go do that in a different and meaningful way, where there are advanced solutions and capabilities where you can engage into data partnerships where that data is governed, you retain custodianship of it, using data and analytics in a healthy and an effective way. It's a really, really important thing for you to think about and understand. Your court data has to be accurate. You need to be able to look at it. You need to be able to inspect what you expect. You need to be able to measure it because you're managing it, right? You have to be able to go in and look at that information. Because if that data is not right, really terrible things can happen. Inaccurate data, it can lead to unlawful arrests, personal reputational damage, litigation, dangerous situations, a whole bunch of things, right? We have a duty to the people that we serve to make sure that the information that we're managing it appropriately, we're managing it intelligently, and that we're really leveraging the technology that's out there to do it in a way that is safe and effective, right? Managed correctly, we can mitigate those risks. We can better empower communities with better data, but it is our obligation. And technology has changed in such a way that I would challenge you to just think about some of the paradigms that might be stuck in your brain today. Maybe reframe those, maybe reshape those. Think about ways that you can leverage these different capabilities to advance trust in what you're doing, to protect what you're doing in a different and better way. This more accurate data provides a safer and more secure experience for everybody involved in the process, which is critical. It's a core part of what we do. And good data then begins to power what you can actually start to do with AI. So we're gonna talk about AI for a minute. Let's start with it's not Star Wars, right? Like this is not R2-D2 and C-3PO. Who thinks of things like this when you think about AI, right? Maybe you think about this. Maybe you think about iRobot, right? Or even more frightening, maybe you think about somebody sitting in the front of your court and it's like an AI attorney, right? Like this is not what we're talking about, okay? So let's ground for a minute on there's really cool stuff happening, and I'll talk a little bit about some of this kind of stuff. There's cool stuff happening out there like this. Not today, not for what we're talking about, right? Maybe in the future, there's an attorney bot. I don't know, maybe, who knows? But that's not real today. So let's focus for a second on, for the people that are deep in technology, forgive me, I'm going to take some creative license here. If you've read a bunch of AI papers and you're deep into how all the models work, I'm gonna oversimplify this for a second, okay? It's still accurate, it's just simplified. There are roughly 3 major types of AI models that are used today. I'm gonna actually start from right to left instead of from left to right. Deterministic models. Deterministic models take a thing and give you back the thing. They're used for things that are super repeatable. They're used for things that need to happen fast with extraordinarily high reliability. You train them with information like, is it a dog? Yes, it's a dog. Boom, go, 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 right? Like they do that really, really well. They're good for like financial forecasting. Hey, I've given a series of information. I'm going to kick a series of information out. And you build a model, it determines an outcome, and it gives you this sort of first pass at it. It doesn't have any creative license. It doesn't do any of this sort of other stuff as we talk about the stuff on the left. It's real simple. They've been around forever, right? Like you might have done a very simple deterministic model if you ever took a stats class and you wrote a linear regression. Anybody ever done that? Long time ago, right? If you ever curve fit a model, right? Like that's a deterministic model. Now that today they're just way bigger. They're way more complicated. There's a whole lot more math, but that's all it is. A probabilistic model, again, roughly the same thing. It just uses probability theory to kind of handle uncertainty in the data. So it gives you a range of potential outcomes. Like, it could be this, 80% likely. Again, back to a stats class. Anybody ever take a stats class and have, like, I don't know, the probability of the outcome being correct, right? Like these are things that have been happening for a long time. So when you think about these sorts of AI models, they're not really as scary as they sound, right? They don't make stuff up. They take a range of known, real inputs, and a model is run to say, hey, can I get an output that matches the data set? And so like if you're going to train these, again, oversimplifying this, let's say I've got 100 units of stuff. I take 80 of them, I train the model on it. And then I take the other 20 and I go, okay, if I run the model on an input on one of my 20 units, did I get the right output, right? So I know it's 7, I put it in the model, it comes back as 7. Oh, that checks the box. If I do that on the remaining 20 and they all come back as 7, well, cool, it worked. If they start coming back as different numbers or different random things, my model doesn't have a very high degree of accuracy and I probably need to go retrain it and rework on it, right? These are not creating tons of content and all those sorts of things, right? So deterministic and probabilistic models are used, and they have been used in lots of places. You'll see these sometimes in medical diagnoses, you'll see these in manufacturing systems. I used to use these in my old world where we would look at like vibration patterns on machines, and if vibration patterns got out of tolerance, we could predict that something was going to happen, and we could predict within a reasonable probability how fast it would happen, and you would decide if you want to go maintain that machine earlier. Saves downtime, does a lot of good things, right? Generative models are the things that we talk about a lot today, right? Anybody heard of OpenAI, ChatGPT, Llama, DeepSeek? DeepSeek's actually a generative model that also does reasoning. We won't go into all the details of all that stuff, it doesn't matter. But generative models use all these other techniques, and then they make things. They're not just trying to say like 2 + 2 = 4. You're saying, what is 2 + 2? And it goes, well, according to mathematical theory, 2 + 2 would be adding 2 items together. 2 + 2 might equal 4. And it's based upon like, it comes up with all this crazy stuff, right? Generative models are used to create images, videos, prompting, right? And all these outcomes. They're great at summarization. They're also great at making things up because they're based on these other things, right? Where now they can be checked. There are ways to protect a generative model and validate that the output is accurate and correct. And as they advance, they're going to become far more precise. But today, they're still prone to a lot of hallucination because if you actually look at what they do, like it's interesting, if you watch a generative model work, they're literally calculating every single output as it goes along, right? Like it doesn't make up the entire thing like we do in our brain and then go, oh, here's what it is. It just goes piece by piece by piece by piece by piece. They call them tokens. These models are used in different things and they can all help to accomplish different tasks. But I want to classify them in those 3 areas for a second because I think it's important into how we think about AI in terms of what Tyler's doing today and what Tyler has in the marketplace. And what, in my humble opinion, and happy to be proven wrong or happy to have a conversation about why I'm wrong, what makes the most sense for the court today. Now, I could be wrong in 3 months because AI is moving really, really fast, right? But what makes sense today in your court operation, not for research, not where you're putting human thought around it, not where you're doing lots of other things, but in your court operation, what makes sense today? And we think about AI as focusing on automating solutions to real problems rather than implementing technology just for the sake of it, right? Y'all don't work at Meta. If Meta doesn't have AI, Meta's behind, right? Because that's the space that they're in. We work in a court. And if we don't have AI, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're behind. It might mean that we're being judicious in how we're leveraging and utilizing technology. So let's talk about where AI matters and also what maybe some of your peers think. Most of these publications I would prefer to throw in a trash can or across the room when I read them. This one's pretty good. A lot of publications are super unbalanced, right? They're fear-mongering, they're taking one side of a thing, and they don't bother to actually talk about a problem from first principles. Casca did a really good job with this particular paper. I would strongly recommend you read it. There's a QR code on the screen. Please grab the shot of it. This is a great paper. And in the end of the paper, I'm going to jump to the end of the paper to a quote. Oh, sorry, hold on. I see one more person going for the QR code, so I'm going to go back. My build's going to go here. Oh, I'm not going to be able to go back. I'll get you the QR code afterwards so that y'all can have it. So at the end of this paper, this is what Casca says. A better approach is to first decide what problem a court is trying to solve, and then develop possible solutions before turning to the question of whether there is an AI tool that will support the solution. In other words, start with the problem, not the technology. Now, I work for a technology company. I am a shameless technology vendor. We sell technology. I'm telling you, don't start with technology. Start with the problem. Then look for a solution that can solve it. Oftentimes in today's world, that's going to be technology, right? And we would love to talk to you about the problem that you're facing and how various technology solutions we bring to bear may solve that problem. But don't get stuck with shiny object syndrome, right? Don't just chase it because it's new and it's fancy and it's in the news. That's not the reason to implement technology. You implement technology because it's going to bring you value, right? That's why you do it. It's going to increase trust in what you do. It's going to increase the value that you're bringing to your constituents, to your employees on a day-to-day basis. That's why you implement it. So you're going to hear, I'm going to talk for a second about bots or agents is what you're kind of hearing them now called in the news cycle versus robots, right? So again, super simple definition. Bots are software. They automate digital tasks. They do things in the digital space, right? They help you with something digital. Robots are hardware. They automate physical tasks. They operate in the physical environment. We are not going to talk about robots much at all here today, except that this is a pretty cool robot, and this is a realistic portrayal of what robots do today. They're amazing in certain areas, right? In my prior world, we had robots running all over the place, and they were really good for what they did. I don't know that there's any real practical application of robot in a court today that I can think of. If you've got a practical application, I'd love to know about it because I think it would be cool. But again, what's the problem it's trying to solve? And then let's maybe look at the technology. So let's talk about why bots matter. AI bots, they enhance people's work and they allow them to focus on more strategic and creative responsibilities. Anybody use Copilot? Ever, right? Some people, yeah. Copilot can help you do things faster. You ever been in a Teams meeting and you go, oh, I'm late? That happens to me often. And you say, catch me up. And it summarizes stuff. That's generative AI. It's a real quick way to be able to catch up and be able to focus on what I'm working on, right? And what I need to be doing. AI bots are going to continue to do that. Now, we need to be careful with how we use them. But what's really important here is that it allows us as people to focus on different things. How many of you are facing a labor shortage? Yeah, it's hard to hire people. It's really hard to hire people. Like, that's no joke. And when you've got them, you don't want to lose them. Like, that's reality. That's the world that we're sitting in, right? How many of you are facing budget pressures, right? Like everybody. Well, we need to think about how we use the scant talent that we have access to in a way that makes a lot of sense. And this is a real problem where I would argue automation and AI can help you. There are other places where it's a shiny, fancy object and it's neat, and I'd love to talk to you about neat things, but this is a spot where I think it can help you solve a real problem. Let's quick take a look, right? Unemployment's near historic lows. which is why we're facing a labor shortage. And unless the economy goes really, really terrible, that ain't gonna change anytime soon, right? We're gonna continue to have a labor shortage in front of us and for the foreseeable future. Furthermore, labor participation is near historic lows, which is also a reason why you're experiencing a labor shortage. And if those two trends don't change, this is gonna persist. And we need to think about how do we best empower our people with technology. We need to digitize our processes for accuracy and for efficiency. And we need to leverage that technology to do things more effectively, more efficiently, faster, because we don't want to lose those people, right? I don't want to lose them. You don't want to lose them, especially when you get a good worker, a good talented person in your team, and they just get tired of the work and they leave somewhere. A, you don't know who's going to replace them, and then the cost to bring that new person in and all the loss of process knowledge and the relationships they have, like you don't want any of that. And so leveraging technology to really pivot that in a different, more meaningful way is super important. So it's essential that we maximize productivity to achieve more in less time. Now, what I'm going to tell you might sound scary. So let's not fearmonger like the New York Times in 1983. Computers are not eliminating jobs. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm not suggesting that you fire everybody at all. You notice how what I'm talking about is making people's lives better. Think about those Pony Express riders at the beginning. They were risking life and limb, riding across the Wild West to deliver mail, to deliver a message. And now we're back as technology changes where they can be at that telegraph in a safe, effective way, communicating just as fast. They still have a job and they've elevated what they've done, right? This is what we're going to talk about. Technology over the course of time has not had everybody lose their jobs. Productivity has gone up. Wages have gone up. There are so many technological advancements that have happened between 1947 and 2016 on this chart. They're too numerous to enumerate. And outside of a blip that happened in 2008, I think is it 2008 on that chart? Yeah, 2008, which we're all aware of, right, the Great Recession. That's the only real downtick in that entire chart of jobs and wage growth and productivity. So this is to say that it's not like we've not lived through these sorts of things before, right? So please keep that in mind. Right now, an employee who uses AI in the workplace saves an average of 1.75 hours a day. Sometimes they do it in stupid ways. Okay? Let's not do this, right? Have another person who faces discipline because they use things improperly. These are not shiny objects. We are working with data that is important. We need to understand the tools that we're using, and we need to use those tools efficiently and effectively and safely, right? And you need a partner who can help you do that. So let's talk about what that might look like if you were to talk to us and what some of our customers are seeing. An average data entry worker, this is, by the way, according to ChatGPT research, so I did use AI to help me in this, this little scenario, costs $57,725 a year, or $725 a year. Okay, that's gonna matter because you're facing budget pressures and you don't wanna just have to hire more and more and more people. So what do we think about maybe automating some work that we probably all deal with? How many of you have an e-filing queue? How many of you think that work, it might be a little bit repetitive? Yeah, if we think about what deterministic and probabilistic models are good at, they're good at doing repetitive things. Okay, what might that look like? Well, let me tell you a story about Tyler Systems. Every day, over $200,000 or 200,000 documents are filed into Tyler Systems, e-filed into Tyler Systems every single day. Over 200,000 a day. So we do a lot of this, right? So this is not a onesie-twosie thing. We do this all the time, every day. Those systems come from the filer into the system, and then they get docketed into the CMS over and over and over and over and over. If you're doing this manually in our solutions, on average, this takes a little bit of time to do by hand. So across the nation, the average amount of time this takes right now is 3.5 minutes for the e-file review and about 4 minutes for the docketing into the court system, on average across the nation. Well, if you look at the cost of data entry worker, it's about $825,000 a day, or almost $200 million a year of human capital that is being spent doing some percentage of repetitive, highly automatable work. Now, some percentage of this requires a human looking at it. It's a really complicated filing. It has, you need to put eyeballs on it for any number of reasons that are unique to your court. But there's some percentage of this, and it's probably not zero. It's probably much higher than at least 25, probably north of 50, maybe even north of 75% of the filings that are great places to be able to look at, allowing your people to not spend their time doing that and doing other things. So if you put AI into the mix, what does this look like? Well, you have an agent, a bot. The human comes in, they submit the document. That agent or that bot picks up that document. Says, well, I need to understand it. So it uses something called OCR, right? Everybody know what OCR is, optical character recognition? Just turns the paper into text, right, into a digital representation of it. It classifies that document, goes, what is this? This is emotion. Oh, okay, do I know how to deal with emotion? Oh, I do, great. Let me do something with the emotion, right? Oh, it's whatever, I don't know how to deal with the whatever, let me send it to the human to go work on it. Or it's a motion on a criminal case and I don't want to deal with criminal, I'm only going to do civil. Okay, fine. Then you kick it off to the human, right? But you classify that document automatically. Then it extracts and it redacts the information that's appropriate. So it goes through and says, who's the filer? Who's the attorney? What's the information? Is it a garnishment? Who's the garnishee, right? Blah, 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 blah. It goes through all the things and pulls that information out. And then it puts that information, again, through a bot or an agent, right into the system, accepts the filing, drops it into your CMS, done. You didn't have to touch it. These bots automate this information, or these agents automate this information every single day. They learn as things go through. Again, back to deterministic and probabilistic models. If it doesn't know something, there's a probabilistic model underneath this, and it goes, ugh, I don't know what that is, not with a high enough degree of precision. So it kicks it back to a human. Well, a human can look at it and figure it out. And when the human says, well, it's this, the bot or the AI engine underneath gets that exact same bit of learning and it gets smarter. And that is then trained back into the model where it goes, oh, okay, well, that's what it is. Maybe I didn't understand it was a weird filing type or somebody used weird formatting, right? This will move across stamps. It does all the things to make these exactly like you would process them with all of your rules and pieces, and it automates these 24/7, 365 so that you can get documents out very, very rapidly to the public. So what are the benefits, right? You eliminate your document review for a significant number of your documents. You achieve virtually zero data errors. Look, I'm a person, I think I'm pretty good at a lot of things. Humans have a 3% error rate. I screw up. You guys might be better than me, right? I'm not gonna say that you screw up, but I screw up. And these bots, they generally screw up a lot less than I do. So you get much, much, much better data entry levers. Furthermore, they process 24/7, 365. They're running all the time. You get an attorney that dumps a whole bunch of stuff into your court at 5 p.m. on a Friday, well, it's done. It's docketed. Have a nice day. And it increases your employee satisfaction. I don't know about y'all, but I don't like doing repetitive things, right? I don't like having to do the same thing over and over and over. It can become mind-numbing. And if you're sitting there processing a queue all the time, is there something different that you could have that person doing? Is there something more creative that you could have that person doing? Is there someone in your court that needs a human to talk to? But instead, like me fiddling around with my hard drive, right? They're doing something that a system could do for them in a different, more impactful, more meaningful way. So I think this is real. This isn't just theoretical. I'm going to talk to you about a couple of customers real fast. We do this in many, many places. Some of these are courts, some of these are not, just to kind of show you how this is applicable in other areas. New York, we do a whole bunch of work with New York. In property and recording, the United States Army uses these solutions, as does Palm Beach County, the city of Palm Springs. Those are customers that are using these. None of those are a Tyler CMS, just to be clear, and we'll talk about why that matters in one moment. I'm gonna talk real quick. So Tarrant, right? I talked about Tarrant earlier, where they were using hyperlocal analytics to get their people into different places. They also realized that, man, we should probably automate some of this because there's a lot of this that's automatable. And so Tarrant County was the first known implementation of AI in the state of Texas. And they had roughly a 24-hour e-file intake, or 48-hour e-file intake, and it's gone. They're minutes on average now, which is phenomenal. And you think about restoring confidence and enhancing confidence in the system, that matters. That's a big, big, big deal. And so They were saturated with all this information, the tools and innovative solution, and a game changer that provides counties relief for the growing number of needs in document processing. Tarrant County is Fort Worth, Texas. You may have heard of this small metroplex called Dallas-Fort Worth. Kidding, it's huge. There's like 9 million people there and it's growing like crazy. So Mary Louise and her staff were under just an ever-growing, ever-increasing burden. And this has really mitigated their ability to be able to provide information very, very rapidly to the public, get these things docketed super fast, and not have to increase their budget, right? Because they're under budget constraints, just like y'all are under, right? And leverage those staff to do something different. When I say not have to increase your budget, you're like, yeah, you're a software vendor. Of course we're a software vendor. These things aren't free, but let's talk about what it actually means. This is another customer and their actual data. They were spending about $2.75 million on the people that were doing this filing. They now spend around $650,000 on the bots that do this filing. Those people are doing other things that are far more productive for the county, providing better services, better value on an ongoing basis. So when they look at increasing their budget on an ongoing basis to deal with the incoming influx of information and the incoming influx of demands, they're able to generate an approximate 75% leverage or savings versus what they were spending on human capital. Now, I'm not saying go fire a bunch of people. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you can leverage and gain scale from those people and have them be happier, doing more interesting, more insightful things on an ongoing basis. And this is real data from real customers. We do this for 12 national CMS vendors, not just Tyler Systems. Of course, we'd love to have everybody in Tyler Systems, but we do this across the board because this matters. This improves access to justice, it improves the efficiency of justice, and it increases the trust in the public in what we're doing. So we spend a lot of time working on this, investing in these products to efficiently and effectively automate work that is automatable. So when you think about AI, think about it like this. It can help you with your productivity. You should automate tasks for efficient operations. You think about decision-making. It can help you enhance your decision-making, leveraging analytics, but more importantly, freeing up your people. Because if you automate those tasks that are automatable today, it can free your people to do better and more meaningful work. And then it can help you with service delivery because those services are now easier to access and easier to navigate. Things are coming back quicker. I know if my filing's rejected faster. Things are moving in a much faster clip through your agency. And that's a meaningful and important piece to improve that service delivery. So how does this elevate confidence in the justice journey across the board? Right? We've talked about a lot of these pieces. Confidence in the justice journey is really about confidence that your data is accurate and protected. We talked about that as SaaS in the cloud, right? There's a huge shift here that's available to you where your IT staff can be unburdened from spending their time dealing with system patching and system maintenance and capital refresh cycles and all this sort of stuff. Rely on a service provider to do that for you so that you can focus on increasing service delivery and increasing the protection of the work that you're doing on an ongoing basis. It's confidence that your data is accessible and understandable. Leveraging data and analytics that are available to you today. You couldn't do this 15, 20 years ago, at least not easily. These tools are available to you. They're available across multiple states in the nation, giving statewide and hyper-local information just like that. And confidence in AI technology, taking your data to new levels of clarity for effective decision-making, not making up pictures and images and text and telling stories and writing research reports, right? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about automating the things that you do today with high confidence and probability, which allows you to increase confidence in the services that you're delivering. And what does all this do for you? Well, I know what it does for me. It helps me to sleep at night, and I hope it would do the same for you to help you sleep at night, to understand that what you're doing is impacting the community in a tremendously positive way. We've got a report. You can grab this QR code also. Future-proofing justice, the why now and how. And we've got this available. I believe it's available at the booth. If not, grab the QR code. That's the best way to do it. That white paper is available. We have a booth. I would love to have you all come join us. We got a whole bunch of folks there. Our booth is number 206. If you come over to the exhibition hall, and I think I'm supposed to wrap up at 11:45, and it's 11:43. So Thank you all very much. I really appreciate y'all's time. That is the QR code for the white paper, if you want that white paper. And for those of you who are interested in the QR code for the Costco paper, just come see me right afterwards, and I can pull that up for you and get you a link to that paper. Appreciate y'all. Hopefully this was a helpful session and you learned something today. Thank you very much.